What are some very creepy facts? Story 1. The Colombian serial killer Pedro Alonso Lopez, who is known as the Monster of the Andes, violation and take down over 300 girls from Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. However, after he was caught and imprisoned for 18 years, he was put in a psychiatric hospital. There, he was reviewed, declared to be sane, and was set free, in spite of his blatant avowal that he fully intends to eliminate again. Since he was released in 1998, nobody knows where he is or what he's doing. He is supposed to be 71 years old at present. He is known for being the most prolific killer ever. Story 2. If you get a blood transfusion and get the wrong type of blood, AB, one of the symptoms is a sense of impending doom. Story 3. There is a genetic disease called fibrodysplasia, ossificans progressiva. When tissue is damaged, it is replaced with bone. Growths form underneath their skin and their joints lock solid. So over time, those affected slowly become encased in a prison of bone just beneath their own skin. They usually have to choose between sitting or standing up for the rest of their life. By the end of their life, they have to drink every meal through a straw and can barely move. Story 4. Over 90 of serial killers choose their victims through intimacy desire. In fact, many serial killers have been caught because they return to the body of their victims to self-care. Story 5. Bacteria and viruses can be frozen for millions of years and still be viably infectious, and having never encountered humanity before, could have no end of catastrophic results should they be uncovered and manage to infect a person or animal. Not to worry, though, it's not like millions of ancient pathogens are currently trapped in permafrost, which is now melting bit by bit each and every day. Story 6. Humans' eyes don't reflect light at night like animals do. I like to say this fact to my wife at a campfire. Story 7. Your eyes have a separate immune system from the rest of your body. If they get damaged in such a way that it affects anything other than your eyes, your regular immune system can attack the damage and will not recognize them, meaning your own body can permanently blind you. What's worse, your body cannot tell the difference between either eye. If one of them gets infected or damaged, your immune system can attack your healthy eye and take away your sight entirely. Story 8. Rosemary Kennedy was JFK's sister. She suffered from oxygen deprivation at birth, and that unfortunately stunted her mental growth. She had a pretty decent childhood, but as she grew older, she began to act out. Afraid that her behavior would risk his political career, her father, Joseph, agreed to have her lobotomized. Her mother, Rose, was against it and forbade him from doing it. So he did it behind her back when she went on a trip. After the operation, Rosemary's already low IQ was lowered even further, to the point she could no longer walk or communicate. Her family had her locked up in an institution and basically disowned her. They never visited and never publicly acknowledged her anymore. Rosemary died at the age of 86. Her mother never forgave her husband for what he had done. Answer: it's unknown if she had that low of an IQ, though she did have some brain damage at birth. She was functional enough to read and write, and part of the reason she was lobotomized may have involved sleeping around and being defiant. She had an active social life. Imagine being lobotomized because the general standard of the family was people like JFK and RFK, and you weren't living up to it. Story 9. Remember that bath salts cannibal guy from a couple years back? He wasn't high on bath salts when he did that. That was just media speculation and bullshit. They only found pot in his system during the autopsy. We still have no idea why he flipped out. Story 10. The Chankiri tree is a tree in the Cambodian eliminate fields, against which babies and small children were bashed after their parents had been eliminate. Answer: a little more context for anyone interested. The Cambodian genocide was a domestic genocide perpetrated against enemies of the state during Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge regime. This included anyone suspected of operating under foreign influences, members of the educated classes, and anyone espousing political or economic beliefs at odds with the state. Under the Khmer Rouge, about 1.5 to 2 million Cambodian nationals died from state-sponsored execution, starvation, and disease as part of the Year Zero policy, which reimagined the Cambodian state as an agrarian communist utopia. The entire population of the capital city, Phnom Penh, was evacuated and forced into agrarian labor. The eliminate fields were simply locations where executions were carried out. One notable eliminate field outside of Phnom Penh is the site of an ossuary and a mausoleum, where victims of the genocide have been catalogued by their age, intimacy, and method of execution. The Chankiri tree stands in this field. Story 11. The men of the ship Essex, the true event that inspires the story Moby male body part, avoided islands after being shipwrecked for fear of cannibals. The islands were settled, and landing there would have brought salvation to the survivors. Ironically, because of this bypass, the men ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. Answer: you know what's even creepier? 2 of the sailors were later rescued by an American ship. They were alone at sea for so long and had to cannibalize their crewmates to survive. When they saw their rescuers, they immediately stashed bones in their pockets. They didn't seem to care that they were rescued. They were obsessed with the bones of their fallen crewmates, so they can suck on the bone marrows. Even after they were on board the ship, they refused to depart from the bones, and would even attack anyone who would come close. Story 12. There is a fungus, cordyceps, that can actually brain control insects, forcing them to move to a higher location, where they will eventually die and release more cordyceps spores. Story 13. The bottom of Lake Superior is cold enough that the bodies of dead sailors just remain. They don't really decompose because it's at freezing temperatures, so they instead get a coating of adipose, think that's how it's spelled, which is liquid body fat hardened around them. Gordon Lightfoot wasn't lying when he wrote, "The lake never gives up her dead source. The lake that never gives up her dead. Ask a mortician." Story 14. In 1975, the CIA had a heart attack gun. It eliminates people, and then the dart denigrates. Just imagine what is classified now. Story 15. A fire whirl can go as big as an EF3 tornado. In 1923, such happened in Japan during an earthquake. The son of Amini eliminated 38,000 people in less than 15 minutes. Story 16. Sea cucumbers have teeth in their jerk to prevent pearlfish from sneaking in there and eating their balls. Story 17. Elmer McCurdy was a failed Old West outlaw. His preserved body was put on display in a traveling carnival, and years later he was eventually assumed to be a mannequin until he was used on set for the TV show The $6 Million Man. His arm accidentally fell off during the shoot, revealing bone and muscle, and that he was a corpse, not a mannequin. Answer: police were called, and the mummified corpse was taken to the Los Angeles coroner's office. On December 9th, Dr. Joseph Choi conducted an autopsy and determined that the body was that of a human male who had died of a gunshot wound to the chest. The body was completely petrified, covered in wax, and had been covered with layers of phosphorus paint. It weighed approximately 50 pounds, 23 kilos, and was 63 inches, 160 centimeters in height. Some hair was still visible on the sides and back of the head, while the ears, big toes, and fingers were missing. The examination also revealed incisions from his original autopsy and embalming. Tests conducted on the tissue showed the presence of arsenic, which was a component of embalming fluid until the late 1920s. So for anyone wondering how they didn't know the corpse was real, it was because it was a corpse covered in wax to look like a wax dummy. Story 18. After raping his blindfolded victims, the Golden State Killer would be super-duper quiet and pretend like he was gone, and right when the poor victims would start to move towards the phone or try to untie themselves, he would scare the fudge shoot out of them. Story 19. One reason that crows and ravens are associated with passing is because they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching on one direction meant that there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterwards. Story 20. Crocodiles can gallop like a horse. I don't like knowing this, so I am cursing you people with this knowledge as well. Fortunately, alligators cannot. Story 21. Imagine being totally aware of someone performing CPR, but you physically can't move or respond. Well, that's what happens when you get bitten by a blue-ringed octopus. You have approx 6 minutes between being bitten and someone starting CPR to keep your heart and lungs functioning to ensure you survive, all whilst being totally aware of what is happening to you. Neurotoxins are fun. Answer. The really creepy thing about this is one story of a guy who got stung, got CPR performed on him and survived, but went blind because he was lying on his back, eyes open, unable to blink because of the paralysis, staring into the sun. Imagine lying there, unable to move, unable to communicate, the sun slowly burning out your eyes and you can't shut them. Story 22. Your brain can play tricks on you to make you see monsters in the mirror, called the Troxler effect. The Troxler effect is an optical illusion that affects how you perceive things, both visually and mentally. Story 23. I once read that you should play dead if a bear attacks you, unless they start licking your wounds because that means they plan to eat you. That still haunts me to this day. Edit. If it helps, I'm pretty sure I was reading about grizzly bears at the time during one of my fevered grizzly man rabbit holes. Story 24. The astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger most likely didn't die until they hit the water miles below the initial explosion. Story 25. If the sun exploded right now, you would be blissfully unaware of it for just over 8 minutes, while the energy travels at the speed of light to get to you. Story 26. There's a spider that gives you a 3-age-long boner before you die from its bite. Edit. The boner it gives you is very painful. Story 27. It wasn't until 1987 that the American Academy of Pediatrics declared it unethical to operate on newborns without anesthesia. Until, surprisingly recently, the medical community felt it would be dangerous to give infants anesthesia and/or believed that they didn't feel pain. Story 28. Polar bears are the only animals that are thought to actively hunt humans. Edit. Maybe not the only ones, but it's good enough. Story 29. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers. Story 30. Sense of impending doom is an actual symptom that often precedes your passing, usually in cases of heart attack. Very creepy for some of us that suffer from anxiety and panic attacks to begin with. Both share that symptom. Edit. As many of you are pointing out, yes, I used preclude incorrectly. Story 31. There's a parasite that enters a fish mouth, eats the tongue, and replaces itself as the fish new tongue. Story 32. According to Abe Lincoln's bodyguard, Crook, he said Lincoln had a dream about his own assassination 3 nights in a row before he was eliminated. Crook told Lincoln not to go on that fateful night, and all Lincoln said was, "Goodbye, Crook," before he went to the play. This was very odd, as Lincoln always said, "Good night, not goodbye." Story 33. I bring this up at parties all the time. When climbing Mount Everest, there's a point nicknamed Rainbow Valley, or Rainbow Ridge, because it's absolutely littered with the bodies of people who attempted to make the climb. The combination of the extremely cold temperature and the bright snowsuits means that they've become a never-rotting but colorful landmark. Answer. Bonus round. Many of them died when other people were around. 2 climbers sat with Sleeping Beauty as she succumbed to hypothermia to comfort her, until they had to leave to save themselves. A climber died next to Green Boots while the trail was busy with other climbers, as they either assumed he was resting and/or was perhaps already dead. If you get hurt or otherwise start to die up there, others can't rescue you without likely getting themselves eliminated. Retrieving a corpse requires 6 to 8 Sherpas, assuming it hasn't become part of the mountain. Extra bonus, the climber who died. Because she spent 21 minutes celebrating reaching the top of the mountain. Story 34. Hearing is the last thing to go after you die. You just might hear the paramedics and firefighters call off CPR. Story 35. Mount Everest is covered in frozen corpses because removing them is very unsafe and time-consuming. They are easily viewed from the climbing routes, and some are used as trail markers. Answer. What's odd is that, although the bodies are prominent, in some cases there is no consensus on their identity. Like, over the years, 2 different people with a similar description didn't return from their Everest climb, and we know the body is probably one of them, but not sure which. Or is it more creepy that some of the bodies are indeed identified, and somewhere out there is a family who knows full well that their loved ones' remains are a landmark on the world's most famous mountain? Story 36. The origins of vampires as we know them. Basically, your body has gas build up when you die. I'm not medically inclined enough to explain why. Basically, the gas has to escape somehow, and so it would pass through the vocal cords in the throat. This creates the low moan that makes the body sound as if it was in pain. The people back then had no idea what was happening, and random bodies would just start moaning in pain. And thus, they believed that the bodies were rising from the dead. And when stabbed, the gas escaped otherwise, thus leading to the belief that the only way to stop a vampire was to stab a dead body in the chest. This also led to a lot of strange burials, i.e., the man that was buried in a stone wall to prevent him from rising from the dead. I can't really blame them. I'd be freaked out too if a corpse suddenly started to make sounds. Creepy for some, but I find stuff like that fascinating. There's documentaries on YT talking about it. I highly recommend them. Edit. Words cannot describe how happy I am that so many of you provided additional facts. I'm having a blast reading your comments. I don't know much about this topic, and so it's great to have a place where more information and leads are constantly being shared. This is the documentary that I saw, but there's a ton of others out there with more, possibly better information. If you have any recommendations yourselves, please link them in your comment. I'd love to see them. Answer. There are other factors to add to the overall myth of vampires. One is that premature burials were a thing back then. Someone would be in something like a coma or vegetative state, but they didn't really have the instruments to tell if a person was still alive or not, as someone in certain medical states can have a faint pulse and shallow breathing, which looks like dead or as good as dead to the untrained eye. So sometimes people would come back to life, which to superstitious people who legit thought that person was dead would freak them the fudge out. This phenomenon was common. Enough that some people were buried with bells they could ring from their coffin in the event they were buried prematurely, and people would put cages around graves to prevent the dead from rising. Story 37. CNN has had a pre-recorded broadcast from the 90s, which they will premiere during the end of the world. Story 38. After getting stung by a cone snail, you don't feel the sting for a little bit. There is no anti-venom and it can be lethal. Treatment is basically keeping the victim alive until the venom wears off. Story 39. From Atlas Obscura by Foer, Thuris, and Morton, Necropants, reader's discretion advised. In Iceland, a long jerk time ago, 17th C, friends followed complex rules to obtain a dead man's skin to turn them into pants. 1. You had to get permission from the dude to use his skin after he kicked the bucket. 2. You would then wait until burial formalities concluded. 3. You would rob the chute out of your buddy's grave. 4. You would cut the waist and peel the bottom half of the body off in one perfect flay. 5. You would then steal a coin from a poor widow, preferably your bud's. 6. Place the coin in the scrotum of the necropants to attract cosmic chute, specifically more wealth in life, and leave the groin full of coins at all times. 7. Pass that chute down to your kid. Fun fact, the Museum of Icelandic Sorcery and Witchcraft has a pair on display for all of us sickos to gawk at. Edit. Steal a coin. Additional. You are right, it's folklore. What is creepy is that they dedicated a museum to all of this fudge metal folklore and bothered to create a replica of a very disturbing idea. I just thought the storytelling would be fun, and lo and behold, I had some amazing comments come from it. Story 40. Albert Fish, the serial killer, loved eating poop. Edit. Didn't expect Uncle Albert's peanut butter to blow up like this. Check out the podcast Time Suck by Dan Cummins. He's got an episode about Albert Fish and goes in depth about other serial killers in other episodes. Story 41. Human brains, when they dry out, smell like cat piss. That stinky ammonia smell. Worked in an ER for 17 years in CT. Had a gunshot to the head come in, and a chunk fell onto my shoe and didn't notice. While driving home was like, "Yow TF, did my cat piss in the car or something?" Went to take my shoes off, and there was edit for all you people with morbid curiosity. Fresh brains look like cream cheese mixed with strawberry jam. Edit 2. No, they died. Trans life harvested organs. Story 42. People don't take their anti-malarial substances when they travel because they hear bad stories about the side effects and they see native people in the areas living okay without taking pills every day. The truth is, populations native to malaria-endemic areas have all passed through pretty intense natural selection for survival and have a host of genes that prevent them from dying or suffering the other worst effects. Also, most of the resistance is built up over time. This is why it's most common for children to die rather than adults. Whatever people have heard about the side effects of the anti-malarials, getting it is so much worse. I, fortunately, have never had it, but I study it as part of my work, and people have told me about having it, and they all say the same thing. It is so awful you can't believe you're even still alive. It comes in cycles, usually 48 hours, and each cycle is agonizing and brings you the brink of passing. Sometimes it takes you Sometimes it spares you for another few hours until it starts again. And there are forms that, even if you clear the infection with substances, it still remains dormant in your system and can come back at any time. Edit. I don't. Want to freak people out too much? There are substances combinations that can eliminate every stage of the parasite as long as there is no substances resistance. Answer. Shortly after I turned 18, after saving up all my money for 2 years, I decided I wanted to travel around East Africa. While there, I got very tipsy one night, first time legally drinking, and threw up my anti-malarial. I ended up getting cerebral malaria, which felt like the worst cold imaginable times 10. I ended up in the hospital for a week and was treated with counterfeit medication, and I was then sick on and off for the next 2 months. I then had to go home. I got so sick and stayed in the ICU for 3 days until I got better. After I recovered, I started developing visual issues, which caused me to need glasses. I also get ice pick headaches and not so much anymore, but after I got it, I developed some nasty depression. Story 43. The stonefish, an incredibly venomous fish living in tropical waters, mostly off the coast of Australia and parts of US, can cause pain that only escalates with time. Eventually, the pain will subside, but even after the barb is removed, patients have reported increasing pain 12 hours later. Without anti-venom or denaturing the venom with excessive heat, the pain builds and builds until the patients request euthanasia. Its spines hold the venom, hidden in its dorsal fins. Aboriginals living around the Great Barrier Reef have corroborees, large gatherings, and will during these gatherings hold reenactments of people being stung by this monster, for what I assume is either amusement, learning, or both. Edit. Corroboree clarification. Edit 2. Pain does eventually end, reminded of tragic entry, where pain does not. Terrible leaves for toilet paper. Thank you for all the upvotes. So glad one of my parents' horror stories from Australia is so well received. Story 44. A black mamba is the fastest snake which can slither at a speed of 12.5 miles an hour. They have neurotoxins which are fast-acting. The venom shuts down the nervous system and paralyzes the victim. Its venom is able to eliminate 10 people, and it repeatedly bites. To add on to this, there is an almost 100 eliminate rate and can eliminate in 20 minutes. Answer. When I went on a safari, the guide had no problem driving by the family of lions, cougars, crazy hippos, everything else we saw. However, when he spotted a black mamba, this incredible fear came over his face. The snake was right in the middle of the dirt road, and he wouldn't even drive past it. We were in one of those open Jeep safari things. The guide was so frightened that he just zoomed in reverse and got away so quickly. He said they can jump up in the car and do all kinds of crazy things. I don't know if that's true, but I know that he was genuinely afraid and we got out of that area. So fast. Story 45. If you begin to display symptoms of rabies, you will go crazy and die. There's no cure. Your brain will slowly melt until you're dead. Story 46. Men who are hanged get a passing arousal, known as rigor erectus. Pretty awkward for the family, I assume. Story 47. More than 7,000 people die annually due to the doctor's bad handwriting. Edit. I didn't expect this to blow up so much, so if you upvoted my comment, thanks so much. Story 48. Sometimes an Amber Alert causes kidnappers to panic and eliminate the kid immediately. Edit. For those that don't know what an Amber Alert is. Wow, this got way more attention than I expected. This is very rare, and most of the time, Amber Alerts are issued for kids taken by an estranged family member where the kid is in no danger. Amber Alerts have also saved hundreds of lives for those that keep asking for a source. Sorry for bumming y'all out. Answer: Oh God, I did not need this right now. Just got an Amber Alert for a little 1-year-old girl. Edit: I'm stupid, I read the alert wrong and it's a boy. I really need to sleep. And yes, in Alabama, for those asking. Edit 2. Since I had a couple people ask, a missing boy is just as important as a missing girl. Apologies for making the boy seem less important. Any missing child is deserving of help, no matter the gender. Story 49. They used real corpses in the 1982 film Poltergeist for the ending pool scene. The actress did.